So, Zach, great to have you on the podcast. Today's theme is why do we live where we live? And let's start with an introduction of you in line with the theme. Just if you can do like a 30-second introduction of yourself.
Sure. In line with the theme, my name is Zachary Coffin. I'm from America. I've lived and worked and traveled in 30 or 40 countries, but Mumbai has been home for the past 15 years. So, Mumbai Mary John.
So, so you're an actor, right? Professionally. Let's get a bit into that.
Yeah, I think probably that's what I'm most known as. And I mean, I've done a bunch of things in my life, but I did formally train in acting and I did formally train in filmmaking. And then I went into a profession which doesn't involve that at all, which was management and strategy consulting. And then I did a bunch of other things and a bunch of other things. And then I was at Prithvi Theatre, which is a much beloved theater. It was started by Prithviraj Kapoor. So Ranbir Kapoor's great grandfather. And it's a bit of a sanctuary in Mumbai. It's a non-commercial space, and really wonderful. And I was watching a play there, and somebody saw me in the audience. I think the light was like reflecting off my head, and so they spotted me. And when I was coming out from the play afterwards, they asked if I wanted to play an evil white guy in their play. And I thought, you know what? I the time has come. So, so I did that, and it was a pretty evil character. In 5 minutes, I rape, I sodomize, I torture, and I kill in the first 5 minutes of my stage debut. So I made an impression, and for years later, I would get a phone call from a casting person or somebody saying, "Hey," they wouldn't say "evil white guy," but they would say, "We need somebody kind of like your type." I knew what that meant, and that was a little over 10 years ago. But for the past 10 years now, actually 11 years, I've been doing acting full time. I mean, as my first job, and then I do other things also, but that's just Mumbai life. Everybody's juggling multiple lives.
Okay. So when you were approached at Prithvi at that time, you were not an actor.
I wasn't. I had actually come, actually, as fate would have it, we're recording this right now. It's December 6th, 2024. Um, I arrived in Mumbai December 6th, 2010. I think that just occurred to me this morning. I went, "Oh my God," because a friend actually, as it so happens, the director who spotted me in Prithvi Theater, it's his birthday today, as it so happens. So the day I arrived, his birthday, our recording, Are. But yeah, I had come to Mumbai in December 2010, December 6th, mainly to get a film project that I had been raising money for and was trying to produce, direct and produce, for some years. And I had previously been to India back and forth for some time, back and forth. But here, this time I came and I knew I was, I'm going to start a new chapter. That movie didn't get made. I lost all my money trying to make it twice. And so I was doing some other things. I adapted another screenplay that didn't work out. And I never really wanted to be an actor. But I thought, while I'm trying to get my project made, sure, I'll act in the play. Sure, I'll do this. And then it just became, like I did. This is what I'm going to do. Oh, sure, a little acting. And I'm trying to rebalance it a little bit with my life. But yeah, acting took over in a big way. I've done now about 100 projects.
Okay. So Zach, I'll just talk a bit about how today's theme came to my mind. There is this thinker called Naval Ravikant. Are you aware of him?
Yeah, where do I know that name from? Can you remind me?
He's like a popular thinker and like a very popular podcast guest. He was
I
on
see. Okay.
He was on Joe Rogan, and he's an angel investor, early investor in Uber, Twitter.
I see. Yeah, I
Uh,
got it. One of those guys.
so somebody recently asked him that. So his family moved to the US when he was a little child,
Mm.
Somebody recently asked him that what role do you think that move from India to the US while you were still a little boy? What role do you think that played in your evolution and your journey? And the answer he gave was that people with high agency, people who have high control on their lives, they find a way of being at the right place one way or the other. If you have high agency, no matter where you are, and if you're aware of your goal in life, you will figure out where you need to be to meet that goal, where the probability is the highest of you meeting that goal in life. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't often use the word privileged. I think it's a completely overused word. I almost have an allergic reaction to it when people start talking about privilege because it gets overused, misused, and it actually stops a lot of thinking. You use the word privilege, and then people stop thinking. Um, but I can't help reacting to what he just said as the height of privilege. Um, he represents in absolute, real, statistical, factual numbers, 1% of 1% of the population of the world that has that freedom to move. I understand the spiritual point he might be making, which is absolutely true that you will find a way to get things done. You know, if you say you're a writer but you never write, if you say, "Oh, I want to be a movie star," but you never take an acting class, right? So there's a fantasy, right? So you need to do these things and make it real. You will find a way. That's that's the path. That's what it is, and it separates people from those who just think it or who desire it. Lots of people desire whatever they desire in life. From separates it from the people who make it happen. And making it happen is quite a spiritual accomplishment. It's a real thing, for good or evil, whatever it is. But just the agency and the act of will is a wonderful thing. Nevertheless, for him to talk about that in the way, particularly around, say, geography and place, is such a strange thing to hear because, uh, you know, 8 billion people in the world. What's 1% of 8 billion? 800 million. What's 1% of 800 million?
80 million.
Eight
80
eight
million.
million. Yeah, like and when did he move there? What year? Must have
And
been
maybe like he
70s, 60s, 70s,
40,
80s,
40, 80s, 80s, I would guess.
80s. Okay, so that was a kind of the second wave of major Indian migrants. So there were some more, but that's nothing compared to, right now there's 6 million students total who are studying abroad. Now that's a huge increase over whatever it used to be in the past. It went from zero to more. It's 6 million right now, and it'll go up to. I think the projections are is going to go up to 9 million by 2030. Right. So that's a good example of this is a trend that's increasing. I applaud the sentiment, which is that do what you need to do to become who you want to become. Right. That's what I take from his quote. But kind of all the rest of it is a little privileged. Can't believe I used the word privilege.
And we've started off right off with a discussion on privilege. We're talking about why do we live where we live, and like privilege is such an important part of why do we live where we live, right? Um, so you've made a choice of living in Mumbai. You talked a bit about how an acting gig led you to live in Mumbai. Uh, what were the factors which made you decide to live in Mumbai?
Okay, so I first came to India. First time I visited was 2000, and then I came. That was for just very briefly. Then I came in 2002. I came in 2002 for one day. I came and gave a lecture, and then left the next day. It was something that SEBI, Securities Exchange Board of India, I had a conference that they sponsored or something, and I was their speaker, and I came, and that was great, and I left. And I came back again for 3 days, and I came again, I think, for a week. Then I came again for 3 weeks, and I came again for, I think, 6 weeks was the next trip, and then 3 months, and then for a year and a half. So if you look at all that, and that was 15 years, right, or 14, or whatever. So if you look at that, it's kind of like I was kind of putting my toe in the water each time. It wasn't. I kind of always knew that India, and you'll hear this sometimes from foreigners, right? That something about India feels like home. So I I think I can answer your question why Mumbai in a very simple way with a short sentence, which is that it's basically my uh, Kurukshetra. However,
Wow,
however,
that's quite a way of putting it.
well, the reason I'm saying that is because I know that what I need to face from a spiritual perspective, what I need to face in life, the challenges that my current existing soul needs to go through, the the highs and lows. Um, Mumbai is a place that does that, and that's what I have needed. Probably is what I need. I currently still need it because I haven't learned some of the lessons. So so that's the answer for me. But I have to say that it's also true, and I think this is a little specific to India. Then, and I think some of your viewers might even think, oh, it's the reincarnation story. But a lot of foreigners do come here, and we go, oh, it feels very familiar. Now, there are other foreigners who absolutely have an allergic reaction and, more or less hate India. It's too much. It's too loud. It's too this. It's too that. That's fine. I'm not really concerned about the surface level reactions. That happens everywhere. You go to Tokyo and it wasn't what you expected. It's not my cup of tea. Okay, fine. But there is something very special about India where many people who come, many foreigners who come, have talked about it as like feeling like home. And I think there's two reasons for that. You can take either the reincarnation aspect, sure. Not much I can say about that, so I'll just leave it at that. And then you can take the other aspect, which is that India is, and this is why India is unique, and this doesn't happen very often. People don't often go to Germany and go, oh, it feels just like home. Like a guy who's leaving Nigeria to start a new
Unless you're
life, and
from
yeah,
unless you're from Austria.
yeah, unless you're Austria, right? You're cousins. But a guy from Nigeria who's leaving Africa for a better life and he ends up in Munich doesn't go, oh, it's something that resonates. Like it doesn't happen. But in India it does. And the most I can understand this is that India is a kind of repository. It's a kind of Akashic records on the non-Akashic plane of all of humanity, which like um, Alexander the Great, Seconder, he comes and he gets up to the northwest area frontier and like that. And with him, he brings his doctors, and they practice something called Unani medicine. And Alexander leaves. There they go, never to be seen again, or more or less. What stays the Unani medicine? Where like why would India keep that? Well, it's something. There's something, and it's 100. Communism is dead in the Soviet Union, pretty much dead in China. But where is it alive? Well, it's here, right? There's like Lindy hop is a kind of a form of dancing from the 1920s. It's still practiced a little bit in Manhattan, and I'm sure dance people will come at me because there are little niche groups, but you'll find it here. So India is this giant sponge. It takes things in, and then it makes it its own, right? Like, in Mumbai famously, you can have, I don't know, pizza, and it's not the pizza that anybody else in the world has. It's kind of a masala pizza, right? So that's what we do, and it becomes so much that people get up. What do you mean? What do you mean? Aloo is not Indian. Aloo is not Indian. Aloo came in the 1500s, and he turned it into potato has now become so Indian that it's unthinkable. It's not Indian, right? And something happens then when a foreigner comes. I just think, and I don't know that this is so scientifically easy to explain, but they can see the resonances and the particles and the kind of um, the consequences of all this immigration. I don't just mean people immigration. I'm not saying that Indian people are like the Kitchery of humanity in terms of like the we can see the Swedes here and there's some Nigerians and all. It's not. I don't mean that so much, but I mean that the ideas of the world when they come, they stay. I mean, when things come here, they stay. They may not percolate through all of India. It may be sometimes north or south or whatever, but for some reason, it doesn't go away. It stays, and India is a repository. It's an amazing thing. So, if I were, for example, before I was here, I lived in Rwanda, and Rwanda was a very interesting experience, very different experience. I would say I would love to go back at any time, but I wouldn't say I felt like it was home. And I wouldn't say that, in, say, Paris, in France. I've been to Paris, France 30, 40 times in the past 25 years. My mom lives there. My uncle lived there. It's very familiar to me, but doesn't feel like home. It becomes home because you can make it a home, sure. But upon arriving to India, a lot of foreigners might have this feeling, and they might verbalize it in different ways. But that's a uniquely Indian thing, which is which is separate from all the other immigration conversation we're having. And I would say the only other country in the world that kind of resembles that a little bit is America. And not because it resembles home, but it feels like, and I'm sorry to do an almost Trumpian kind of cliche, it feels like freedom. Like people come to America and whatever they had from the past, this is something different. And that is also something unique. So you got these two places in the world. There might be some other countries which are unique for specific things, but for our conversation, one is the feels like home because of its kind of eternal humanity repository aspect, and the other one feels like new because it is the new world. We don't even believe in history in America. We don't like history. We make our history, right? We make new history. So that is, no matter where you come from, that's also something special. So I wonder about these things a lot, actually. And when you come to the question, why do you live where you live? It's such a simple but profound question because in a strange way, it's like asking, why are you who you are? It is that question. It is the same question.
Yeah, it
It
is.
is like asking, why do you do what you do? If you, I mean, bear with me for a second. Again, you can either take this one of two ways. You can either take it from a reincarnation perspective, and I'll just leave that as it is, or you can say, as technology advances, who we are now can be expanded in multiple ways, not just this is where I live and what I do and who I am. It now becomes I can be where I am. But now, if you take that, now bear with me, here's the second part. It may one day be possible in the future to ask the question, why do you live when you live?
Oh wow. You're talking
If a
about.
person in the future is able to access time travel, to say, then they can go and pick the time travel period, the period of history that they suit them in the same way as you pick which city suits you. Which I'm going to migrate to Delhi, I'm going to migrate to Mumbai. I'm going to migrate to the 16th century, I'm going to migrate to the 17th century. You could do that, perhaps. Or even if you don't want to believe the science fiction or the science, I wouldn't say fiction, but say the science aspect of that, take reincarnation. Why has my soul chosen this moment in life, in history, and time to be here on the planet at this time? Right? So whichever way you come at this question, it basically comes back to who the hell am I? Yeah, who the hell
I
am
think
I?
another. I think another
Really
question. Another question we might see within our lifetime is how long do you want to live? It might become a choice rather than.
good question. Like, where do you want to live? Right? I mean, people's bucket list. If again, this is a little bit privileged because at the same time, in 8 billion, there is still, easily a billion people who are definitely not having this conversation, right? So it is a little bit privileged on that side, but that's, we'll take that for what it is. Um, but yeah, there are people who are very, very actively looking at how do we get to 150 years old, right? Medical advances being, sure, your body starts to decompose, not decompose, but sorry, you're not dead yet. But, there are issues with this material. Um, you know what? We can fix a lot of that. And even if by 140 you're kind of a Frankenstein, right? You're still going if you want. There are people who want to, and if they have the money to, and all that, that is possible, right? It's a famous ship of Theseus question, right? So Theseus, he builds a ship and he starts sailing, and as he's sailing, for one reason or another, something on the ship breaks, and they stop at a port, and they have to repair it, and they get a new sail. And then they're going a little further, and there's some wood in the creaking or whatever is broken, so they stop, they get that replaced, right? And by the time he's reached his destination, every single part of his boat has been replaced with a replacement part, such that not a single part of the boat, when it arrives, resembles the boat that was there. Not one part of the physical boat is it. Is it the same ship? Did he sail on the same ship the whole time? I don't know. But these questions, I love these questions. I think I'm a little bit on the cusp of that. I think if I can maintain my health for say a good 30 years more, I might just hit that spot where technology has come in and goes, okay, we'll take it from here, Zach. Like okay, we got it from here, right? Uh, and this is very strange days. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so about the question that why you chose to live in India, you gave a very spiritual answer that you felt like you belonged here and you felt almost spiritually connected when you came here.
Mm.
Uh, what about the more physical side of things, like more worldly? I think that's one way to put it. Like, what
Oh,
about
that I think
finding work?
Mumbai is yeah, right, right. So I I have an arranged marriage with Mumbai, and what I mean by that is simply that it doesn't matter how bad the corruption, how much malaria or dengue fever, or the roads are disgusting, or this guy is cheating you, or just how difficult everything in life is, or you know, every year about 2,000 people die on the local trains, which is insane. There's no city in the world which would accept that. Like, it's unthinkable that six people die on the train every year. And like, if that happened, I don't know, New York or Paris, they would stop the train and they would say, we can't do it, let that happen. If it happened 2 days in a row that six people died on the train, after 3 days, some minister would be like fired. And yet it happens here, right? And every single month, tens of thousands of people come. And more or less make it both better and worse, right? Mumbai is the second most densely populated place on earth. Only Dhaka, Bangladesh, in which basically all of Bangladesh is inside Dhaka. Like Dhaka is almost a country, but anyway, the point is, yes, they are the most densely populated. Mumbai is the second most densely populated thing. And so what you have here is that everything gets intensified. Um, your dreams, your hopes, your ambitions, the ability to move ahead, as well as the crushing failures and struggle and, you know, basically I put it just death, because because if you're that guy on the train, it's death for you that day. But it's a tough city. More than death, there's a lot of people who come to Mumbai and then they go back for one reason or another. Um, so Mumbai, in a practical worldly aspect, if you look at all these things, you would go, well, this is not great. I mean, air pollution is not as bad as air Delhi, but as the air in Delhi, but um, it's about 6 years of your life you'll lose by living in Mumbai from the air pollution levels. I mean, the air pollution levels are every year I've been here, they've gotten worse. And Indians really think, well, that's a kind of a long term thing, and we've got much bigger short term things to work on. So I understand that thinking. I'm not sure I agree with it, but I understand it. Yet, nevertheless, it means approximately 6 years of your lifetime is reduced by that. Um, and that's if you're going to choose a place to live, why would you do that? In fact, I have a lot of friends who, these are kind of upwardly kind of middle class kind of people, but I remember even starting in 2011, I met people and they said, I've had it with Mumbai. I'm going to go to Goa. And every year I would see another kind of cluster of people going, that's it, headed to Goa. If Mumbai needs me, I'm, a couple hours away by flight or whatever. And I used to think, quitters. Ah, can't take it. Yeah, yeah. This is what Mumbai does. It crushes you. Only the strong survive, which is an example of Stockholm syndrome, right? Which is named after another city. Stockholm syndrome is literally that the victim of the kidnapper falls in love with the kidnapper, right? So Mumbai has kidnapped me, and yet I still fall in Mumbai Mary John. But these people who got away, and I almost say escaped, right? Every year I used to think, oh, they weren't meant for it. And now I think, my God, they had an intelligence I didn't have. It's almost like that Arthur C. Clarke intelligence, which is he could have chosen. He was famous. I mean, the Sri Lankan government gave him. They literally gave him some permanent special residency because he was such a honored personage to be in their country. They just, you you ask us what you want, you be here. He could have had that anywhere if he wanted to stay in, I don't know, whatever country you can imagine. Any country would have welcomed him for their home. And it takes intelligence for him to go, no, this is the place, right? So I don't know that my arranged marriage is for better or for worse. What I know is that although I personally am not married, I've heard um, the way an arranged marriage works is I choose to love you. So I choose to love Mumbai. I actively, every single day, like an affirmation from a kidnapped victim, I say, I love you, Mumbai. And I do. And Mumbai is great. And, some of that's kind of, soft and emotional stuff. But it's also true that Mumbai is an amazing, amazing, dynamic global city. So that it's not international enough, like say New York or London, but it's getting there, and it will be. But it is a city which attracts migrants, and what that means is people are compelled, like a magnetic attractive force. They go there, and their fate can change. And
What it means is that other cities around it are even worse. That's
well,
what
that
it.
is sure, but it's not just. I mean, yeah, you could say that, but you could choose to go to Pune if you're coming from, I don't know, Raipur, and you want to start a new life. Do you choose Pune? Pune's not bad. Indoors, I think, gets rated as the cleanest city in India. Why don't they go to Indore? Nothing wrong with Indore or Pune, but Mumbai has a special quality.
There is this.
In fact, just one thing on this. They actually there was a researcher. I think he was at the University of Michigan. I was at a conference, and the city planners in Mumbai 15 or 20 years ago they were really trying to figure out, as growth in Mumbai is definitely happening, how do we make Mumbai a world-class city? And they looked at the research, and they found that this guy in University of Michigan a researcher had done a study of 6,000 cities around the world. And the question is, what is a world-class city? And the answer is it depends. It depends on what do you value, what do you care about. If what you care about is raising your children for their education, I think it was like Oslo has like the best overall nurturing educational system you can imagine for raising children. If it was for, I don't know, cultural activities, probably I think it was New York, perhaps London, but New York, something like that. If it was security, I think Geneva was like the safest city in the world. Right. So yeah, okay, these are world class cities in their own way. But to their surprise, they found that Mumbai, and by the way, on education and safety and culture and all those kind of things, Mumbai was not high on this list of, I mean, it wasn't probably at 6,000, but it wasn't where it needed to be. But to their surprise, Mumbai ranked number one over all the other 6,000 cities, number one over New York, London, Tokyo, Paris, everywhere in the world in one thing, something which economists call economic mobility. Economic mobility
Exactly.
is
That's exactly what
literally it's literally defined.
I'm.
Sorry,
I'm a living example.
yeah, but it's literally defined. What are the chances that when you come to a place, your children will rise to a higher income strata than you? So if you arrive and you're poor and you go to Dharavi, what are the chances your children will be lower middle class? Very good in Mumbai, better than anywhere in the world. If you arrive in Mumbai and you're middle class, what are the chances your children will be upper middle class? Better than anywhere in the world. And if you come here as a crorepati, what are the chances that your child will end up being you know, some,
Arabpati. That word is Arabpati.
is it? Oh, okay. But it's the Ambani story, right? It's what's Mukesh Ambani's father? I can't think of his name right now.
Dhirubhai
Um,
Ambani.
yeah, Dhirubhai Ambani, right? So he comes, and he himself was a successful story, but his son takes it on from there. That would not have been possible in Delhi. All love to Delhi for all the things it brings. But this is one factual statistical thing that Mumbai really does have. So besides all my Kurukshetra nonsense and all my spiritual, this is where I feel I need to do my lessons and all those kind of things, and I have an arranged marriage, all that. There is really a purely economic reason that you can make it here.
So has it happened for you?
No.
Has economic
But also,
mobility?
I don't have children, so I'm not sure. I'm not the target market. I'm not the target market. Actually, there's an expression from I lived in New York for 4 years, and there's an expression. There's a famous expression for New York is if you can make it here in New York, you can make it here. You can make it anywhere, and I think that is also something that is very true about a world class city like Mumbai, which is you know if you want to be the best in the world at fashion, go to Milan or Paris. If you want to be the best in the world at finance, go to Wall Street. In India, maybe to Wall Street, but basically in the world, Wall Street, right? There are a lot of second places, but at the end of the day, it's Wall Street. If you want to be the best in the world in entertainment, it's still Hollywood, right? And Hollywood attracts lots of migrants, right? There's more Australians there than Americans. I mean, it's just insane, right? So what I'm saying is that Mumbai has this quality definitely on the national level, that it really attracts something that it creates excellence because it's so damn hard. Yeah, it's really tough. It's a tough city. It really is.
Yes, it is. There's almost a cliched story that I, that so many rich entrepreneurs tell, that I came to the city with 70 rupees in my pocket
Yeah.
and now I'm so rich. There are like at least five billionaires who tell the same story. And
Well, it's a true story. I think. I mean, some of them may embellish, but I think it's. I think there's a lot to it.
I'm not a billionaire, but it is somewhat true in my life as well, that when I came to Mumbai, I was quite broke, and at some point, work picked up and went on to do quite well. Yeah, so you talked about marriage a little bit. So, what is the relationship between dating life and choosing a city, according to you?
I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer that. And I follow. I really, I find. I mean, it's a wonderful question, and I'm somewhat fascinated by this kind of the areas of cultural meaning and cultural norms. So there are some, I think, Instagram, YouTube channels that I just keep following their videos. I think one is Dating Without Borders, something like that. I wish, I wish, they're the people that answer your question, which is, they'll go into Mexico City and they have an expat there, someone from, Norway. So the Norwegian is in Mexico City and they ask, what's it like to be dating in Mexico? And there's a real comparison, right? And all these kind of things from around the world. Um, Also, I mean, the world is changing, but it is this concept of arranged marriage. It does exist in other societies. It existed in the West in medieval times and other parts of, actually, for a lot of Western history. But the individualism of the West really started this thing where you can pick who you want, which gives rise to dating, right? Like literally 200 years ago, there is no such word as dating. There is no such concept as dating. The most it would be is we are going to the dance, the common public dance tonight, and maybe I will bump into somebody I love there. But there was not all these things unless it was for the intent of marriage, and often arranged, and even kind of a light version of arranged for even in America for a long time. But with the rise of individualism, for better and for worse, you have in the West this concept of, you can choose the life you want, which means that you can choose where you want to live and you can choose who you want to be with. I suppose, why do you live where you live? Why do what you do? We can add to that. Why are you with who you are with? Is another variation of this question. But what is a little bit different about India is, and I see this now because I guess I've been here a long enough time to see it over half a
It's
generation.
interesting.
Yeah.
Can I just bring in Naval Ravikant again?
Yeah, yeah. Oh no,
Because like
the Ravi Cut. Yeah,
he has a lot of famous quotes, and one of his famous quotes is that the three most important decisions you'll make in your life is what to work on, where to live, and who to marry. And these are the exact three things that you just listed. So
well,
you're just 500,000 Twitter followers away from being the thinker of our times.
thank you. Well, I agree with him. I agree with him. In fact, Warren Buffett, the most famous and arguably, maybe not even arguably, the most successful investor of all time, but certainly from American history, right? His firm Berkshire Hathaway has $1 trillion under management right now. He's literally sitting on $300 billion in cash right now because he expects there's going to be a downturn, and when there's a downturn, then things get cheap and you can swoop in and buy it. And Berkshire Hathaway and Warren Buffett, who's late 80s, he's been invested since he was 13, right? He literally started with $5. He figured out how to use $5 for investment. And he said the most important investment decision you're ever going to make in your life is who's your wife or who's your spouse. I mean, his case, his wife, but and he made that choice early on. I might be wrong, but I think he met her in college. But certainly it was by early 20s, 22, 23, maybe 24 max, but it might have even been earlier. So by 20 to 24, he had that sorted. And, it's a kind of a very Indian uncle way of looking at it. But, he was explaining to a group of Columbia Business School students that it is the most important decision. I think where you live can change, right? What was the other one that Ravikant meant? What do you do?
What to
What do you
work
do
on?
is interesting because again, it used to
What to
be,
what to work
yeah.
on?
What do you work on? That's an interesting one because and arguably you can even say who you're with can change because Americans have invented the triple marriage. So, so wow, America, you've not only figured out where to live, I can live anywhere I want, and who to be with, I can live with different people at different times. And what do I want to do? I'll do this, and then I'll do this, and I'll do this. Like America, definitely shaking it up for America for world history. But what you do, I think, is to some extent easier because who you're with, if it's a committed thing, if it's a real thing, that's a big thing, and that affects you biologically. I mean, it's amazing. The more we learn about DNA and vibrations, like your kids will inherit your grandmother's trauma in their DNA, right? So these are not like, I mean, it's a very, it's not obvious, but if you just kind of take some very, I hate to say conservative, very traditional, or say, you could even say in the Indian context, some very Vedic wisdom. But, these things matter more. And the kind of modern trend about, you know, it's just the conservatives who are against liberal values that are holding us down. There's truth to that, but there's also truth to, the American experiment has its failures also. So anyway, I agree with Ravikant on those three things, I suppose. But notice he didn't mention my my sci-fi reincarnation one. When you choose to live, yeah, he left that one out. I'm gonna tweet at him. Hey, sir, little point distinction. If the person leaves Raipur and wants to have a better life and goes to study in Indore, I don't know what made them choose indoor. Maybe it's just the university they got selected in. Maybe it's chance, whatever. But let's say they chose it for some reason. And they meet somebody else who's chosen indoor. They already have that commonality, right? So it's definitely true. You have this in the concept of neighborhoods, right? In Mumbai, it's definitely true. The very first question almost anybody's going to ask is, it's such an Indian question. Where are you placed? Where in the city do you live? Right? And it's a very tricky question because on one hand, they're asking, my God, how far away are you? Because traffic and distance in Mumbai is brutal, right? I've heard Bangalore has become even worse, but it is brutal. Why should somebody spend 2 hours in a rickshaw when they could probably walk it in an hour and a half? Right? It's brutal. So where you place is like, can we be friends or are you too far away? Right? But it's also a very, and not always consciously meant this way, but it's also a bit of a, which tribe are you from? Right? So if somebody says, I don't know. If they say Bandra, they go, "Oh, great!" And Bandra's like, Shah Rukh Khan lives in Bandra, right? And a lot of famous celebrities lives in Bandra, and it's probably the most liberal neighborhood in Mumbai,
In
probably
India,
by
in India.
in possibly in India. Yeah, I mean, maybe there's some places in Goa, Puducherry, and that doesn't mean it's a freewheeling discotheque. It just means that because it has a very strong Christian background, there are people who wear dresses, and there are Western food and all that, right? So you say, oh, away from me, you go, oh, I'm from Bandra, and you go, oh, great, and then they say Bandra East, and you go, oh my God, because Bandra East does not resemble Banjo West at all. And I have just revealed by my reaction, the privilege I have because Banjo East is, I mean, it's changed because of something called BKC, but it's for a long time, it's basically slums. the simplest way to put it, right? And there's no comparison. I mean, Banjo West would have probably 1,000 times the wealth as Banjo East. So where are you placed? Right. So if you're dating somebody and you're looking for somebody in Banjo East, well, are you a Banjo East person? Well, great. You're in the right place to look for them. So where you live is conducive to that. If you are, I don't know, if you're in a high scientific field and you relocate to, where, I think Bern, no, where is the CERN scientific library in Europe?
Geneva,
It's
Geneva, I
Geneva,
think.
Geneva or Basel, or maybe it's Geneva, but it's in Switzerland, right? And you because you know you're going to be interacting. The city is more populated with scientists, right? And people who are studying, and people who are visiting for 6 months to do a special project there, or whatever. I mean, it's no coincidence that when people in LA date, they go, "Oh my God, all I'm doing is dating other actors," because oh my yeah, like, and then it's it's become to the point where you say on the profile, actors मत करो, no actors, only real jobs, right? Or whatever. So, to the extent that a place is attracts certain kinds of people, which we all know is for sure, either religion or philosophy or ambitions, personality types. There are places that are quiet, sleepy. Like even I lived in Bangalore, and Bangalore has back then, it always had because it used to be and still is to some extent a military cantonment. Um, it has a military base still, but it was a major British military base. So they had a culture of getting up significantly earlier than I would say Mumbai. And you would find, people out like uncles at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 a.m., not just uncles, but lots of people with a stick and walking early in the morning. And yeah, you see that everywhere in India a little bit, but in Bangalore is much more of an early morning culture. And likewise, the city regulations at that time, I was there in 2012, at that time, they had, I mean, it sounds ridiculous to me now, but they had just imposed a curfew limit of 11 p.m. Unless it was a five-star hotel, all other things had to, and restaurants, right? Everything else had to close by 11 p.m. Restaurants could go to midnight. That's it. So the night culture was not outside, not parties, not clubs. It was house parties. That was the Bangalore culture, right? So for a variety of reasons, places will affect lots of things in the culture, and that, of course, affects the culture of dating, so to speak. So to answer your question, pick a place that you know that you like, and you're more likely to find somebody that likes it also. That you like, you know what I'm saying, yeah. Or are not where they want it to be, but the national border, partition. You're living on one side of the line, partition comes, you got to switch to the other side. It's just literally a line drawn on a map by a British person, but now your life is uprooted. That's where you live now, right? So geopolitics, not an insignificant factor. I mentioned the Arthur C. Clarke, which was um, the communications mobility, right? Things can be remote now. So you have digital nomads. Like, these entrepreneurs who live in Bali are basically copying the lifestyle of Arthur C. Clarke that he originated back in the 1950s. I can pick wherever I want to be and I can get my things out there, right? But the other side of that, which is a separate distinction, which is I don't want to, I wouldn't say in his case it was persecution, but he would not have had a free life as a homosexual in Britain in the 50s. So for to be free of that persecution, which of course for other people actually is persecution, depending on which country or climate or culture or religion or area you're talking about, is a very real concern, right? So you definitely do have asylum people. Arthur C. Clarke is a funny. It's hard to think of him as asylum, but asylum light. So that those we've also mentioned. Um,
So another factor you mentioned all the digital nomads living in Bali,
yeah.
and I saw a lot of that culture very up close when I was in South America in October this year.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You're in Peru. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. I was in Peru and I was with people who were living the digital nomad lifestyle for the last 8, 9 years. And some of them were like entering their mid 30s and they were talking about how their bodies are not taking the digital nomad lifestyle as well as it did in their late 20s.
Mm.
Um, so why do we live where we live? Another aspect of that is, like you mentioned, that some people live their whole life pretty much in the same house. And then there are people who are actively working towards shifting countries every 90 days. If you
Mm.
have a passport like the American passport, then you can go to almost every other country without a visa.
They call them
That
digital nomads, but they're really digital gypsies, actually. That
what is the
gypsies.
difference? What is the difference between a nomad and a gypsy?
I think the nomad has a kind of a routine, right? So, if you take the Mongolian, Oxforders or something like that, but they're in one part during this season, they go to another part during another season, another part for here. The grazing of the livestock, all that. There are there are, I think, structural reasons that they have that. Um, and gypsies are partially because of persecution, but they also are widely stereotypically known, have been known as criminals. And it's also connected to what they do. It's often entertainment kind of business and circus kind of stuff like that. So they're always kind of on the move. And where they go, from India to the UK, you can draw a straight line. You'll find gypsies all along, back and forth along the way. In some sense, I hate to say this because now I'm getting very stereotypical. I can imagine that they avoided going to the same place twice because they had such a bad reputation wherever they left. And often it's very unfair. I mean, never forget the Nazis, with the Jews, they literally put gypsies in concentration camps. So it's a terribly unfair way that people the way people look at travelers, right? Your perpetual traveler for most of history has been distrusted. Um, so that thing about the gypsies right now, these digital nomads or digital gypsies, they are basically opportunists. They're going to wherever they feel is the best, cheapest life they can get. Right. That's kind of a gypsy kind of approach, which is let me, very cleverly figure my way. Right. This year it's Malta. Next year it's Portugal. Back to Bali. I'll switch over here. Whatever it is like that. So I think there's not unknown in history, but this is kind of resembling that more than what I would say is nomadic herders in life. The word nomadic also has a bit of a kind of a nomad life as a loner, and sometimes that has that sense of freedom. But I think again that's a little bit tied to that, the lone herder with the livestock, something like that. A little minor distinction on these kind of things, but also there is one very real distinction: the nomad who goes from one place to another and then back to a third and then back to the one. When he comes back, um, and this is very seasonal, right? According to the different weathers and all that stuff, he's more or less welcomed back, and he's back inside of another community. Maybe he goes to the second place, and there he's a loner. The third one, there's a mix, but by the third, he's another. Whatever. So he's welcomed back where he's going. The gypsy was never welcomed. They were always the traveler, and you've got to again. I mean, modern world is so different, but for most of human history, the traveler, the foreigner, the unknown stranger who arrives in a city or a town is first viewed quite suspiciously. Like, everybody has a town. Why is this person not in his town? Is he a business person trading, whatever, gold, coin, train, spices, whatever? Are they a religious missionary? Are they a soldier, a mercenary? There are very few categories that are somewhat socially understood, and everything else is like, what, you want to come to our village and make your home here? That's, you get rejected. So Ravikant's opening, your quote from Ravikant in the beginning, my first reaction to it was, well, that's quite a privileged perspective because not many people could do that. But it's privileged in another way because there were not many countries in the world when he was in the 80s that would say, yeah, come here and study. No problem. Right? That America was quite open on this. I mean, America did have different levels of immigration, but imagine me going to, I don't know, some city in, I don't know, some place deep, Uttar Pradesh or Rajasthan or something like that, saying, "Yep, I'm here to live." even now, I think people are not going to want, they're going to call the police, is going to call somebody, who's going to call somebody, and, Ministry of Home Affairs is going to say, what is this guy? Is he a spy for Pakistan? And there's actually, I'm not trying to belittle it, there's actually good reason for this. In the past, disease was carried by strangers, right? So the reason you have so many communities and subcastes and 3,000 dialects in India is because every 50 or 75 kilometers, something like that, 50 75, but certainly every 100 kilometers, even if you're North Indian, you speak Hindi, every 100 kilometers, the dialect changes again for the native natural village, and changes again and changes again. It's getting smoothed out because of broadcast TV and radio and all that. But in the past, take, I don't know, 1,000 years ago, those represented different little clusters. And when somebody came from another place, you know, wait a second, there's a huge thing about what disease do they have. We need to, I mean, there's some modern concepts like COVID, where we're all in lockdown, but you want to put that person in lockdown, you kind of put them at the outer post and you study them for a while before you let them into your city. That's how it was for most of human history. Now, despite that, there was in India and in Greek culture also this idea that the guest is God. But what I mean is, there is this contradiction in India, which is highly segregated, and a lot of it, and this also kind of deals with caste, but a lot of it was around sense of cleanliness, whether actual factual cleanliness or kind of spiritual cleanliness. Those concepts were very embedded in Indian culture. And so you had these segregations. And if somebody tries to go from one to the next, wait, who's the stranger? What caste does he belong to? Right? I mean, all of these questions come in, and particularly in the Indian context, but certainly in the West in different ways too. Where is this person, Flemish or Spy? What is it like that? Most of human history did not really like that idea of travelers, unless you're certain categories. And so the spread of ideas came through those kind of four categories. It's a remarkable thing, really. Anyway, that's again back to that point that Navikant in his quote is not realizing the benefit he had of getting to be in a country that allowed him to be there, whatever restrictions and limitations it had on the number. And I'm sure he qualified, maybe 1 in 1,000 qualified, and he was better than everybody else. He passed all his exams or whatever. Give him credit for all of that. But there's two sides to that privileged aspect.
Yeah, so I have a personal belief, and I believe I have a feeling you share it as well, that I believe in sampling cities before forming an opinion on them. Um, like last year, I spent a month in London. This year, I spent some time in South America, the US.
Yeah,
And the only challenge I found in living in the US or even in London is it's quite difficult to figure out the medical system when you move to a new city. If I
yeah, that's
figure
true.
if I figure out that part, I would really love to move, and maybe as I visit the cities a few more times, I will figure out that part.
Well, you can
But
actually get just as friends of mine have this kind of global health insurance now, which is not bad. I mean, particularly if you're in, America or someplace like that, is not bad, right? For a reasonable amount, it kind of holds you off against some big things. So just keep that in mind, right? So people like you choosing things. So services also become global too now. Interesting. Yeah.
my belief has always been to sample the cities, live there for at least a month, hopefully longer, before having a sense of whether how it feels like to live in that city, how it feels like to go out in the city, hang out with the people who live in that city. And I'm surprised more people don't do that. Live with this. Actually, it's a privilege thing again. That's where our discussion started. But I have that privilege, so I make sure that I sample the city before I decide to move.
I think it's a great idea. It's not, I mean, it's a privilege thing, but it's just choices, right? Um, if you have a salary job, even if you're making more money than, if somebody has a salary job and they make more money than you, they can absolutely afford to, spend a month in Geneva if they wanted to. They have the money to spend 2 years in Geneva, but disrupting their full-time job for a month to do that's not possible, right? So what's happened is that, for a variety of reasons, your personality, whatever, lots of things, you have chosen a life where you have an awful lot of freedom to choose which direction you want to take your company, which direction you want to take your life. I like to explore this for a little while. Not so much, right? So, in the same way as you sample countries, you probably sample different product lines or business lines. And then, yeah, actually, let's go further on it, right? You're reflecting basically your personality on it. The thing I would say, which is good about it, is particularly separate from the business side, from the geography side, is that the world is so globalized in its information that we think we know all about Korea because we see news from Korea or we watch some K dramas. And that's not true. So it is actually a very good idea to actually sample a country in real life, to go. And, many people really do value travel, but there is a difference between traveling as a tourist and kind of, as you said, being there a little bit longer. And not just a 1 month thing. I remember the author V.S. Nepal, who was Indian but was born in somewhere in the West Indies, and he wrote several books about India. And the first book he wrote, gosh, I'm sorry, I can't remember the titles right now, but he later in life regretted that he wrote that first book because it was his first basically his impressions from his first trip to India. He was going back to the motherland, and then he went back to there. And Vietnam Paul's a celebrated world author, right? He's a Salman Rushdie kind of figure. And yet, with India, he had judged too quickly, right? So if somebody says they've been in India for a month and they know India, I can't even laugh. It's so ridiculous, right? You can be here 10 years and you just beginning to scratch the surface.
Cool. I guess that's it. If you want to do any concluding remarks, we can do that. Not really.
Yeah, sure. there is there's one other guy. I heard about this story when I was in college. I think I went to college. I went to Columbia, and some of the Beat Generation poets, Allen Ginsberg most famously, came out of Columbia. So we just kind of informally kind of knew things about their life. So Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac are probably the most two famous of that generation. But there was another guy who was slightly older than them, a little bit like a godfather or maybe a big brother to them. An author, novelist author named William Burroughs. William Burroughs wrote his probably most famous work is Naked Lunch. Anyway, this is American literature, but extremely influential for at least two generations of American writers. And this most modern Beat Generation is kind of known for being cusp, avant-garde, experimental in all things. Experimenting with drugs, experimenting with culture, experimenting with sex, experimenting with literature. Let's tear up the way poetry used to be done, do it differently. All of it. So the very experimental wave of writers and other kind of artists out of the 50s and 60s, leading to the hippie movement. Um, Probably born out of New York is fair to say, but there's a cluster of parents in that conversation. But this guy, who is among the most experimental of them, perhaps even they even say he's the most modern experimental of them all. Jack Kerouac said that. He lived in Kansas City, Kansas. Kansas it's like living in Nagpur. It's dead center in the middle of the country. It's literally, you have California, you have the East
Interesting.
Coast. It's literally,
Interesting.
yeah.
Interesting. You said Nagpur, the head of RSS, because Kansas is like deeply Christian, right? So
Well, sure, that's some religious aspect of that. But for him, it wasn't that. It was, it's so strange. It's not the way I would think, but sometimes, geniuses think these ways sometimes. He said, it is geographically the optimal spot. And
okay.
so I choose it as my home. He literally picked a place, which could be I can get to New York and I can get to LA, I can get to here, I can go to Florida. He literally picked his home for something that you would think is so kind of superficial. And he was not a superficial person at all. And I'm not. I don't think I'm that person, but it makes me doubt what I think is smart because this guy's very smart, and he might have something that I don't know about. So why do you live where you live? I think we've gone through now. If we rack them all up, there's probably this is the last one on that bullet point list. The last one is geographical optimization, right? Right,
Yeah.
geographical optimization. Like me being in Bombay is actually not geographically optimal. Optimal will probably be Paris. And then I could get to America, get to India, back and forth, easy. But I don't, right? But he's literally in a place that is conservative, but for other reasons. So to each his own is the expression.
Cool. I think we can stop here, Zachary. This has been a lot of fun. Really
I
enjoyed.
think I really I think this is a wonderfully deep and profound and deceptively simple question. And I'm going to
Yeah.
be thinking about it for a long time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a prominent theme in your life, in my life. I
Ah,
think more people, I think too few people think about it. I think it's too important a question that not enough people think about.
yeah. I think people often think, where do I live? But they don't phrase it in a philosophically reflective way of why do I live where I live? And that does something with your brain. Anyway, it's something I hope the viewers also think about because it's a profound question which for most of human history didn't need to be answered.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. Okay, Zach, here we stop.
See you, Sachin.
Bye, bye,
Bye.
bye.